Hello, listeners. Today I'm going to introduce you to a man who ran a corporate business for 20 years and then sold it to his employees. He then transitioned into the nonprofit sector, working with organizations that provided camp experiences for teens. And then one day, while loading a trailer full of camp gear, he had a heart attack, which then resulted in quadruple bypass surgery. And do you know what he did while he was laying in that hospital bed recovering from the surgery? He was inspired to start a new nonprofit. Yeah, you heard that right. Bob is a Texan with a big heart for unaccompanied teens, and I can't wait for you to hear how his organization is changing the world one life at a time. Hey, have you ever wished you could hear some good news for a change? Well, I might have just what you've been hoping for. Welcome to Your Nonprofit Life, where we remove our rose-colored glasses and explore what leaders are actually doing to move their nonprofits from messy to thriving without burning out in the process. I'm Laura Zelke, Director of Member Experience for the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. Join me each week to explore the ups, downs, and whoopsie daisies of your nonprofit life. Let's get started. Welcome, Bob. It's so great to see you. And how's it down in Texas today?
It is a beautiful morning. It's cool. It reminded me of being in the mountains when I stepped out this morning. It is not characteristic of Texas. Of course, it'll be 95 degrees this afternoon, but this morning is a beautiful, cool morning.
Well, I'm jealous. I don't know what has happened in North Carolina, but summer arrived about a month early and it's been hot and humid and sticky. You know, when they put the forecast up, the 5-day forecast, and every day it says uncomfortable, yeah, that's North Carolina in the summer. Well, welcome. I'm honored to have you here. This is, again, I've introduced you already, but this is Bob Harris from Level Pathways. And Bob, I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what your organization does, kind of an elevator pitch.
Sure. Happy to do it. And thank you for inviting me. Level Pathways was started about 3 years ago to serve teenagers who are unaccompanied in high school or want to re-enter high school. One of our main goals is to graduate from high school, and we have a very high success rate of our students doing that. We are going through our high school graduation for the local school district was just this past Friday and Saturday, and we had that in the new Globe Life Field, which is home for the Texas Rangers, who have not even played a game there yet.
Oh, wow.
Due to COVID-19, they opened up the stadium for high school graduation. So we're kind of in the middle of that. If we look backwards at the process for Level Pathways, we're currently in the exit phase. And what that means is that our clients go through our program, and then hopefully if we're successful with them, we exit them from the program to whatever's next. And we talk about that along the way with the students. We don't want to just drop us, although we exit them very quickly after they've completed our program, we don't want to just drop them.
Right.
So consequently, we have about 4 different exit strategies. One of those is going into the military, and we have a student who's doing that as soon as he passes the ASVAB test.
Okay.
And military is really a good option for some students because, particularly if they're homeless, because it provides housing, it provides clothing, it provides structure, it provides education. This particular student is going into the Army, and of course, they're very career oriented. So hopefully he comes out of 4 years in the Army and military service with a career that he can use immediately.
Yeah.
One of the other options on exiting is, of course, to go to a university. And we have 2 of our students who will be doing that. One is going to a local community college, which is a very good option. The other student actually has a full ride track scholarship to a university on the East Coast. And
Wow.
He'll be leaving about the middle of August to live in the dorm there. And of course, typically when you go off to university, you're living in housing provided by the university, but that's a good option for him because again, he doesn't have housing locally.
Mm-hmm.
And then another option would be trade school. And we're fortunate enough in the Dallas area to have numerous trade schools that are viable for students. The hourly rate that's being quoted for graduates is extremely high right now. And for some students, just going to another 2 years or 4 years of college doesn't really make sense economically. It doesn't make sense for their talent level. They should be working with their hands more than they are sitting in 4 years of English.
Sure.
So that's a good option. We have an avionics school close by. We have several electrician schools close by. So going into a trade school is a really good option. And then the other is just getting a job, starting a career. We would rather see them go through some type of technical training before they start out on a career. But for some students, again, continued education in a formal college is not necessarily the best option.
Sure.
So we talk about those exit strategies with the student long before it's time to actually move on. We try and exit a student within 3 weeks after they have graduated from high school, and hopefully they know where they're going to be going.
Yeah. So I'm curious, starting from the back of the process, I guess, that's the exit. What is the entry?
Yeah. And of course, the exit is the goal.
Right. The exit is the goal.
Yeah. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for graduation from high school and then on to whatever's next. The entry takes a lot of different entry points, oftentimes trying to convince a student who is unaccompanied. I'll be glad to explain that term.
Yeah, please.
Trying to convince a student who's unaccompanied to be in a formal program is difficult. They're used to their independence. They are leery of programs. And so getting students into our program is not just an easy path. Unaccompanied means that a student is living without a parental unit. In other words, they do not have a parent that they're living with. And the common vernacular for that is unaccompanied.
So no parent, no guardian, right?
Right.
Okay.
And that's contrasted by a student who may be living with a homeless family in a car, in a by-the-day hotel, or some other homeless situation.
Okay.
And there are a lot more students in that category than are in the category that we're talking about of just being unaccompanied or without a family. Unaccompanied students are hard to find. They are not pushing a shopping cart, if you will, down the street. They want to, like any other teenager, they want to look like their peers. They don't want to appear homeless. They want to have the right clothes, have the right backpack, to look like everyone else. So because of that, we can't just visually tell who a homeless student is like you can oftentimes with an adult. We have to rely on the school district, on our own counselors, case managers to try and figure out who those students are. The school district is the primary way that we systematically look for homeless or unaccompanied students. We are approved by our local school district for our program for 18 and up. Now, we would like to be approved for 17 and under, in other words, youth, but the school district at this point has only approved us for adult students, in other words, 18 and up students.
Okay.
And so they refer those students to us. It has been a process with the school district, but we hope this coming year that they will approve us for 17 and under, not for housing, but for all of the other services that we offer. So the Level Pathways program is approved for 18 and up unaccompanied students.
Yeah.
With both the local school district and with the state of Texas.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Once you have a student who's referred to you and they agree to go into your program, what exactly is your program? I mean, I know the exit strategy is to get them out of high school, but I would like you to explain a little bit what it means once they come in and how you're handling that, because I think it's so inspiring what you're doing. And it's really something that I think is life-changing for these young adults.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. The problem with homeless teens is that they're homeless. That sounds real obvious, but the problem with homeless teens is they're homeless.
Right.
So you have to look at the options. One option is a shelter, and the suburb we're in of Irving, Texas, does not have any shelters per se. Now, the city of Dallas, which is right next door, has multiple shelters that will accept both youth, meaning 17 and under, and adults, meaning 18 and over. However, the problem with shelters is that most of the time they're full. It's hard to get into them. You have to know the rules of the shelter on getting in. They're not conveniently located for the town we're in. And the other problem with the shelter is they really have, for lack of a better description, a funky attitude. When a student enters a shelter, they are put in there with homeless adults, and homeless adults have learned the ways of homelessness. We try and reach students before they have learned those homeless ways. We want to take them off of the path of being homeless, not teach them how to be homeless.
Right.
So shelters can be a very temporary option, and we use that occasionally, but we don't think it's the best option.
It's not a good long-term option.
Exactly. The other option is to live on the streets. And again, very few homeless kids want to do that.
Sure.
After a few nights, the excitement of that really dwindles quick.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's not camping out.
And it's dangerous. I mean, that's where a lot of kids, young adults who are living on the streets are the perfect target for human traffickers. And so what do you do? What is Level Pathways doing? Because I'm assuming that's a different option.
Yeah. So the model of Level Pathways is not a shelter. It's not living on the streets. It's not couch surfing with a friend. When a student enters the Level Pathways program, we place them with what we call a host home. A host home is a volunteer family within our community who agrees to house that student until they graduate. And we have contracts set up for the student and for the host home that specifies exactly what will happen and what won't happen. But the exit period, if you will, starts when they graduate from high school. So it's not an ongoing process. The host home knows that there is a specified period and that there is an ending to their relationship with that student. The host home provides a bed, a shared bathroom, a shared bedroom sometimes, although a lot of times it's a private bedroom. They supply everything the student needs to be housed. They may provide food. In other words, the host home may say, hey, we're going to get a hamburger Friday night. Would you go with us? But they do that at their own choosing. We provide food for the student within the house, and it's really up to the host home on whether they want to take advantage of that. I will tell you that most of the time students eat with the host family. I kind of refer to host homes somewhat like a foreign exchange student.
Okay.
Where a student comes in for a specified period of time to live with that family. And then they know that eventually that student is leaving. With the foreign exchange student, it's to go back to their home country and to their home. With a Level Pathway student, it's until they graduate and start that exit phase.
Yeah.
So it is a voluntary position. It is not like a situation where the guardian is paid. So the motivation is not receiving that monthly check. It's for the good of the student.
Yeah.
Now, the other things that Level Pathways provides is everything around that host home. So we're providing medical care, we're providing tutoring, we're working close with the school district to make sure that their grades are improving. And these days with technology, you don't have to go through a counselor. You just ask the student, hey, bring your grades up on your phone and let me take a look.
Yeah.
It eliminates the excuses. We've got grades and attendance on the student's cell phone.
Wow, that's cool. I'm glad they didn't have that when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Just saying. So, Bob, let me ask you a question. You are one of the co-founders of this organization. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'd like you to tell your story of your journey into nonprofit, because you weren't always in nonprofit, although you have done a variety of things. And I would love the listeners to hear your story and how you came to even have this idea for Level Pathways.
Sure. Yeah, I really started out in the manufacturing sector.
What'd you manufacture?
I originally was in telecommunications.
Okay.
Back with the old Continental Telephone, which was out of North Carolina. And I was in one of their manufacturing companies out of college here in the Dallas area and did that for a number of years and went to work for what's called a sheltered workshop. It teaches disabled folks how to work in a manufacturing environment. And And one of my responsibilities as manager of that workshop was to go out and approach companies about doing subcontract work for them. That kind of became an interest in starting my own company. And so I started a manufacturing company in 1979. I was involved in it for 20 years.
Wow.
And we made small mechanical metal parts primarily for the defense industry.
Okay.
And I was fortunate to work with companies like Texas Instruments and Raytheon and Motorola.
Oh, wow. It helps being in Dallas, right? In that area. There's a lot of big corporations down there.
There are, particularly in North Texas and Austin. So the company was very successful. After 20 years, I got burned out in doing it and sold the company to the employees.
Wow.
And so that's been a very successful venture over the years. I still occasionally will help friends on a consulting basis with their manufacturing company. But the further I get away from it, the further those opportunities are.
Yeah.
So I took a few years off. I retired at age 48 after selling the company and did a little church work and found that, of course, very fulfilling, but it still wasn't exactly where I was wanting to go. I was offered a position as the executive director of a church summer camp.
Okay.
About an hour and a half north of our home on the Texas-Oklahoma border. And there's a very large lake, the largest in Texas, called Texoma, Texas and Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that for 5 years. We built up the attendance at the camp. We improved the facility and just had a good experience as the executive director of that. Took a few years off after 5 years. And I was talking to some men that I knew one day over a meal, and it was suggested that I look into another camp that operates out of Colorado and New Mexico, primarily in the summer. And I was offered the position of executive director of that wilderness camp. And so we were able to travel to Colorado and New Mexico in the summers.
Oh, wow.
For about 4 years.
It's beautiful. That's just beautiful.
It is. It is. Beautiful, crisp mornings every day, looking up in the mountains, working with college age interns and serving primarily youth groups. So
yeah,
hard to go wrong with that combination.
Right.
We were operating that camp and loading the trailer and the truck with backpacking gear to go to Red River, New Mexico. And I started complaining about my lower jaw hurting. And my son had come home to help me load the trailer. And he said, "Dad, I got on the computer and it says that lower jaw pain is often a sign of a heart attack." And he said, "I think we ought to go to the hospital." And I said, "Adam, I'm not going to the hospital and sit in the waiting room for a couple hours when we have this much work to do." And he said, "Okay, if you're still having the jaw pain at 10 o'clock tonight, we're heading to the hospital." Well, the jaw pain had continued. So at 10 o'clock that evening, I went to the ER of our local hospital, and there wasn't any sitting around. They said, "Mr. Harris, we need you to go into that exam room right over there." And 45 minutes later, they came in and said, "You're having a heart attack."
Oh, wow.
So that put a quick halt to going to the mountains.
Yeah. Scary.
It was, yeah. Because had it been 2 days later, I'd have been at a minimum 9,000 feet at base camp up in the mountains.
Wow.
At one of the peaks at 14,000 feet with very little quick way to get off the mountain.
Wow.
So, yeah, God was watching over me at that point and put me at a place where I could get help, get very good help. And I had a quadruple bypass operation. It was very successful. And very quickly after that, I was up and going again. And so that's been a little 3 years ago. And I feel great working full time and happy to be doing so. While I was in the hospital, I heard of an organization that might be needing an executive director. And again, I knew.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you right there because I just have to laugh at that. So in the hospital, quadruple bypass, and you're like, "Oh, hey, here's an organization that might need an executive director." Oh,
yeah.
This is like nonprofit life, is it not? I mean, just you can't keep a good man down. That's all I got to say right here.
You can keep him off the mountains.
Can't keep him down, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the hospital recovering from your quadruple bypass, and you hear about an organization that might need an executive director. Continue.
And I had actually met one of the ladies involved with that organization a number of years earlier.
Okay.
because I hired a homeless teenager to work for a company. And so we became familiar with that organization in Irving that serves homeless teenagers. I won't go into all the details, but I could tell that there might be a transition happening with this nonprofit. And so I said, look, here's my circumstances. By now, I've been executive director of 2 nonprofits. I kind of understand the nonprofit world. I understand fundraising. If you ever had a need for an executive director, please put my hat in the ring. Well, it turned out that there was another conversation going on, and they were saying we need to start a new organization to serve homeless teenagers in a different direction. And so I was fortunate enough to get in on that conversation very early. And as the conversation progressed, it was clear that the organization could really use an executive director to guide the founding. Of course, like many new small nonprofits, that was all great, except there was one component missing, and that was money. So I was still receiving compensation from being executive director in the mountains, and it gave me the luxury of saying, okay, I can work for you as an executive director and we can start compensation at a later date. And so we did that.
Wow.
We started the nonprofit. I became executive director. There were 3 of us who were the founding members, and then very quickly we put several more founding board members on a board, and we started the organization.
Wow.
And it has now given me an opportunity to be executive director of this 3rd nonprofit. And, we know how to fundraise. We know what pitfalls are in nonprofits. Not to say that we're not stepping into a few, but It's been a successful nonprofit in the first 3 years of operation.
Well, I think it's really interesting to hear the background story of your journey, because it just seems like you've been on this trajectory from the time that you were working in the manufacturing company and having this heart for people who maybe don't fit the model of how our society is set up for people to succeed. If you don't fit in that, then you kind of fall along the wayside, and you've been creatively trying to find ways to just pour into people's lives so that they can still find fulfillment, I guess, and some level of success on their own, to have some independence and some self-esteem, and that you're really honoring who they are as human beings. I think it's a powerful thing that you're doing. I mean, you're literally helping kids have a chance who may otherwise have not really had the guidance to really know what they could do afterwards. And in a way, you're also preventing them from becoming victims of human trafficking and getting into just a really negative cycle in their lives. I mean, they're going to make their choices, and I get that. But to be able to come in at such a critical transitional time where usually, ideally, you would have some caring adults speaking into your life. If you're just kind of not around any, the only adults, I'm using air quotes, who are speaking into your life are your peers, that may not be helpful. And so let me make sure that I understand. So you're working with the school districts. They will kind of give you a heads up and you'll reach out, or however that works. And then you'll match them with a family or a couple or whatever, like a place where they can have this host home. And then they go live there for the duration, which I'm assuming it's pretty short term if they're already 18 and it's like the last year of high school or something like that.
That's correct.
Just a few months. And during that time, there's some relationship building going on. I'm assuming that the host homes, you have the boundaries there for a reason, but have you noticed, or do you know if the host homes are trying to stay in touch with them after they leave? Or is it just kind of, okay, goodbye?
That's a great question, Laura. Yes, because like you said, a relationship is built there. So the host home wants to know how that student is doing, how their sacrifice of their household and that interruption in their household, even grief, how that transpired and, was it profitable for the student? So yeah, several of our host homes have kept relationships with their student to the point of one is a godparent for the student's child.
Oh, wow.
One of the students who just couldn't conform to our program because they couldn't make it home by 10 o'clock at night during the school week. And eventually we had to agree to disagree on their involvement with the program, has since come back and is living with the host home in a very friendly, productive situation. We're not sure how long that will go, but they came back to the host home as a place for security. So that
Wow.
happens a lot. If I can mention the home that is the godparent, it's a really neat story. It was our second client. And this young lady, when we would interview her to be in the program at school, she would just constantly cry. And the case manager finally got out of her that she wanted to get a job. She wanted to eventually live on her own, but the person she was staying with did not want that for her. Well, what we quickly learned was that trafficking does not just mean sexual trafficking, it can also mean slavery type trafficking.
Right.
And this young lady, who was a senior in high school, was being trafficked by a person in authority and told her that she didn't need to go to college. She didn't need to get a job because her place was to stay with this family and basically take care of their house.
Yeah. I've heard about that kind of trafficking.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like slavery. They were holding over her head that they had helped her.
Right.
In fact, really what happened was the student's mother was a prostitute in South Texas and had handed over her to this family who was now trafficking her. Now, when we say trafficking, I don't think it started out as intentional trafficking, but it morphed into that.
Yeah.
It became that. And the family thought of her as theirs. They thought of her as they owned.
A slave.
I always thought that trafficking was sexual trafficking because that's mainly what you hear about. This trafficking was slavery-oriented trafficking. And
Right.
it was a high school student with a person of authority, and that's probably as far as I need to go with that. But
Yeah, and I can speak to that as one who's been on a board of an anti-human trafficking. It happens all the time. And especially it's very dangerous for minorities and people who sometimes are coming from another country. I know of a story of a gal up in the Minnesota area who had come over, and it was all well and good. Everything was on the up and up. And then when she arrived, they took her papers, and that was that. And she became their slave. And so this girl was living in this situation. And how did you find out about it?
Well, we found out about it through her living with the host family.
Oh, okay.
Out while this close relationship while she was with the host family. In this case, the host family was a single female and 10, 15 years older. But those stories came out while she was living with this young lady who happened to be the host family. And it was a trying time. As an organization, we had to decide, how far do we pursue this?
Right.
We went with what is best for the child, what is best for the student. And that's the way we made decisions. And it continues that that's the way we make decisions. What is best for the student? But anyway, today I can tell you that student, that young lady, has married and had a child, and the host home, the single lady that she was staying with, is the godparent of that child. Wow. It's a very good relationship, very healthy relationship, and I hope one that we don't come across again, but it's possible.
Sure.
I just want to say, in serving homeless teenagers, we run into a lot of other social issues like trafficking, poverty, teenage pregnancy, health issues. So we're involved in a real wide range of social issues by trying to serve that homeless student the best we can.
Sure.
It was helpful to have two founding partners through that situation who had experience with a lot of other social issues.
Right. Now, these are the women that you were talking about earlier that you met while you were in the hospital, or you met one of them while you were in the hospital?
Well, I came in contact with in the hospital.
Okay.
And then shortly after I was released, we met. But yeah, there was an organization a number of years ago here in Irving, Texas, that served homeless teenagers called Advocates for Homeless Teens. And two of the ladies who were a part of that group are also the founders of Level Pathways.
Okay.
The three of us started conversations again about 3 years ago. And they have been instrumental in starting this organization and it prospering.
Sure. What are their names?
Their names, president of our board is Dr. Lori Davis, and our treasurer is Sharon Johnston. And Sharon runs another nonprofit here in Irving called The Main Place, which supplies clothing to homeless folks. And then between the three of us, we were a good mix. We all had different talents and things to bring to the nonprofit. Those two ladies really know the community. They're highly involved in the community. So that has helped a lot with the organization of the nonprofit.
So I'd like to ask you a question about one of your clients that you mentioned earlier. You said that you had one this year who is headed off, got a full ride scholarship to a university on the East Coast. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, what happens when he or she moves out of state and to this location where there is nobody that they know, and who do they call for support? Like, how does something that's beyond the scope of what you do, like I know you said the military is great because it provides clothes and food. And I know a full ride scholarship should include room and board, right? But what about books and what about clothing for that student while they're in college?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me back up just a little bit. We serve students who are homeless. We also serve students in what we call unstable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those students a lot of times may be housed, but their housing situation is very tentative.
Mm-hmm.
They may be living with a friend, another student. They may be living with another relative. And that unstable housing kind of builds on top of the homelessness. In other words, we consider unstable housing the same as being homeless because at any moment that housing could go away.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could drastically change. We've had students whose parents were deported back to whatever country they came from, and now they're living with an aunt or uncle. That is a very tentative situation, or can be.
Yeah.
This student that's going off to college on the East Coast in housing that we consider not a stable situation.
Mm-hmm.
But he does have relatives who care for him but just can't provide stable housing. Getting back to your question, he does have some emotional support. He knows that we're going to be here for him.
Yeah.
Now, it's going to be hard for us to provide clothing other than to provide financial help.
Right.
We're probably not going to ship him a pair of blue jeans because of shipping.
Right. Amazon. That's why we love Amazon, right? Amazon Prime, free shipping.
We're going to make sure that he leaves with everything that he needs.
That's awesome.
If he needs dorm room supply,
Right.
if he needs a laptop, if he needs a desk lamp, he's going to be carrying those with him. And we're very good, and our donors are very good about providing all those necessities when a student.
Yeah. You know, you're really launching someone, and based on your mission and how your organization is set up, you really can't just launch them out into the great unknown, right? Like, you are kind of keeping tabs on them a little bit as they continue on because there's that relationship. And your organization is so new. It's wonderful that you already are having success stories. You know, the host family who became the godparent of a child of one of the clients. So I'm really excited for you as things continue and you continue to lead the organization. And I have one more question before we go, and that is, what are you gonna do? We're in COVID and the schools haven't even really been open. How are you finding people when you don't have the school district to help you out with that?
We call that the organic path of referrals for students. We have a systematic path through the school district, and then we have an organic path that is basically non-school district. We have 2 interns this summer, and their primary objective is to find homeless kids. Last week started a Twitter campaign, and we've opened a Twitter account specifically for kids. It's not donor oriented. Our board, it's not adults, it's for kids. And hopefully they can use language that attracts kids. We're going to organizations that are kid related, like the soccer, the pep squad, and that sort of thing. looking for kids who may be in a homeless or unstable housing situation.
Yeah.
These two interns, again, their sole purpose is to ferret out, if you will, students who may be homeless.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't know at this point, June the 10th, what the school district will look like. And it's hard because, again, the mall is not as full as it was.
Mm-hmm.
We can't necessarily go to the mall and hand out postcards. We are talking about face-to-face events for later in the summer. We're talking about maybe sponsoring a skateboard competition at the skateboard park. We're talking about doing some free nights at the new upscale bowling alley.
Yeah.
We're trying to plan some face-to-face activities later in the summer.
Sure.
At this point, things are just not fully open.
It's kind of a challenge. Well, I would love to, on the show notes page, not only link to your organization, but let's put a link up there for the Twitter so that if there are people who want to follow that, understanding that it's more geared toward teens, but I just think it's a really interesting pivot. Everybody's having to figure this out and how we're going to change as a result of the pandemic. And I want to thank you for all the time that you've given to this conversation this morning. I think it's been really informational and also inspirational. And just a reminder that when there's a will, there's a way. When you have that passion and that fire in your belly to help, you can figure out creative ways to do it.
One other thing in closing, Laura, we are developing this organization with a template in mind.
Mm-hmm.
We think that the host home model could be taken to other towns. It's probably not a mega city operation.
Mm-hmm.
Not a Dallas operation, but it could easily be transplanted to another suburb. And so we have created our forms and our policies to be a template that could be easily placed in another city, depending on the demographics of that.
Sure. So are you already ready to share that? So if someone heard this and they thought, hey, that would be a great addition to services we're already providing, or they wanted to maybe use that model, are you at a place where you would be willing to have a phone call with someone about it?
Certainly a phone call.
Okay.
We have to wait and see how COVID plays out.
Right.
But I would think by the end of the year that we could easily transfer our model and template to another town. Now, we're in an ideal location here in Irving because we have two big cities, Fort Worth and Dallas, that are close by and a lot of suburbs around them. But we've gotten calls from all around the Southwest that have an interest in what we're doing.
Yeah, well, because you're helping kids graduate, you're keeping them with a focus on the future rather than on their present circumstances and giving them hope. And I think that that is noble. And I thank you for it. And I thank you for not giving up when you were in the hospital with your heart attack. I would be interested to hear your son Adam's take on this whole experience. So I'm going to create a show notes page that will have information about your organization and also some links to your website. So if people want to learn more, your donation page. And I just want to thank you again for taking the time. I know we've kind of had a hard time getting our schedules to coordinate. So we did it. I'm going to celebrate that. I've been wanting to interview you. So thank you very much. And I will see you in the village.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate the invitation.
Thanks for listening. To access the show notes or share feedback on this podcast and link over to our socials, visit our website at yournonprofitlife.com. That's yournonprofitlife.com. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you're going to love The Village. It's our exclusive online community where we take what we're learning in the Nonprofit Leadership Lab and apply it. We take it to the next level with live Q&As, boot camps, online book clubs, and legit support from experts committed to helping you extend your nonprofit life. By the way, since we're just getting started, it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a great review on iTunes. The reviews will help us get the podcast in front of more people as we try to take the whole sector from messy to thriving. See you next time.